Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
What's going on, everybody? GSMC Football Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network. It's Ethan, it's Brice, the dynamic duo of your Tuesday afternoon, morning, and evenings, or whatever you choose to listen to us. Brice, how are you doing, man? How is life? You know, I know basketball is going through it for you right now. I know after the Luka shot, I don't know what possibly you could be on. Probably cloud 9, cloud 10.
I mean, listen, it was a very exciting time, man. I watched the game when it happened, so obviously it was great, man. Obviously, I automatically thought, man, imagine this in front of a live crowd. Because, you know, obviously that piped-in crowd noise is just like, something big like that happens, there's no reaction. It's just the same level.
Yeah.
But, you know, for the most part, you know, if it was a live crowd, it'd be great. But, yeah, you know, it's just like a great game yesterday, and, you know, it's just, like I said, it's just great to have some sports back, man. It's great to have sports back, have these types of moments, and because these are moments that, you know, really light the sports world on fire, and when the sports world is on fire, man, it's great. I mean, that game was lit on fire in two different sections, from the Luka perception and then the playoff P perspective.
Oh, pandemic P. Oh, man. Some people are saying pathetic P these days. It's getting bad. Like 3 straight in a row, Paul. Like, come on.
I really thought he was going to bounce back up. Like, you had an Instagram post, everything, and then just 3 straight games of just nut. I'm just like, dang.
Nah, man, it's bad for him right now. I feel for him. I like Paul George. I think people actually want Paul George to be good. It's just that ever since this day, like, I don't think Indiana players or Indiana fans want Paul George to be, you know, successful in his endeavors. But at the same time, it's like, you can't be this bad. Kawhi is trying his hardest. Like, he got the best game he was going to get from Lou Will, still lost. Like,
I know, they're just like, man. Because I was just like,
that second layup he missed in in overtime, where he made the first one with pretty easily, and I was like, maybe he figured it out, but then he just clanks the second one.
That's one thing about it, though. I've been saying, he's been missing bad on a lot of his shots. I'm just like, dang, because, you know, Paul George could be a pretty precise shooter, but this stuff, I don't know. I don't know what been happening in that hotel. I don't know what been going on.
Like, there's no fans in the stands to make that. Like, it's not a fan thing. Clearly, it's a mental thing. But no, Luka's a dog. Like, that was crazy. Mm-hmm. Like, he is the real deal.
On a bum ankle? Man.
It didn't look that bad. Clearly, like he said, it's not that bad. But nah, man, that shot was crazy. But, football now. Like, so a lot of stuff is happening. We got a bunch of training camp things to go over as the season gets closer and closer to its inaugural start. And the Ravens have had quite an eventful training camp thus far. They're having their own Antonio Brown situation. Well, basically it's resolved itself. Almost called him Eric Reed, but Earl Thomas basically speed ran his time with the Ravens this offseason and basically is going scot-free with a $20 million signing bonus. And now the Ravens are trying to fight to not have to pay the $10 million that he would, you know, be owed, quote unquote, for this season because he's not going to be there anymore. He just got released. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of ridiculous, right? Like, I never would have predicted that, you know, Earl Thomas would basically get himself off of the Ravens after signing, you know, basically a multi-year deal. It was, right? Mm-hmm. $20 million signing bonus. That's a lot of money that he just gets to walk away with. For one, first we have to think about this isn't like a one fight, because when it was first announced, it was like he got into a fight and now the Ravens are thinking about moving elsewhere, finding a trade for him. And everybody's just like, whoa, it's just a fight. This happens all the time. Like training camp incidents and fights happen a lot. But apparently this is not the only thing that's been going on. He's been in multiple fights. He's had issues with management. Like there's just been a lot of coming late to practice, not liking being called out about certain stuff. I don't know. It seems like the guy was supposed to be a culture guy, but it seems like he is not. That's not the case. So he's released at this point. And after the fight with Chuck Clark on Friday, he made an obscene gesture to the Seahawks, remember, in 2018. And now it seems like the smear campaign is done. He's off the team. So what happens now, Brice? Who do you think is going to take a stab at Earl Thomas this time?
Well, obviously the primary team that everybody's looking at is the Dallas Cowboys. They've been interested in Earl Thomas even back when he was in Seattle. He's always wanted to play for the Dallas Cowboys. So that's probably a team that they're looking at as the primary team that he'll go to. They said the 49ers are also in that as well. Potentially could maybe take a stab at him. And probably a couple other teams. But obviously I don't know. It's funny sometimes when you go to the team that you want to go to, I guess you could say, they're going to be in the best behavior. So I feel like Dallas is probably going to be the team because that's his favorite team. Like I would think he would not do this exact same thing there. I would hope not, but we'll have to see. I mean, but it is not good that with a team like Baltimore, the organization that Baltimore has, they've usually always had good locker rooms. You've never really heard Baltimore ever have players that were just bad in the locker room. And if they were, it was kept under wraps and they probably were cut or something like that. So, for this to happen, it really makes him look bad, mm-hmm. But he can still, play. He's only 31, I believe. And, so he can still do some things at his age. And, he can still be a very big part of a defense potentially. So, it really just depends on whoever feels like, he's going to help them the most in their defense. And, we'll have to kind of see. It'll be interesting to see how much, he wants. Obviously, since they're kind of going through the grievance right now, usually with these situations, you're already still getting paid by Baltimore, so you don't really have to go out for another team and say, okay, you got to pay me big bucks too. Even though you could, but it's just like, well, you're getting paid there. We don't pay you a lot here. We can pay you like a good, maybe 5, 6, 7 million here while you're getting that over there. Even though, Baltimore, like you said, is going to file a grievance to not pay it, and then the NFLPA is going to file a grievance back to give them the money, so, that's going to take a while. But, for the most part, I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with Earl Thomas moving forward, and I'm probably sure he'll probably be signed within the next week or two, potentially. I don't see this being something that lingers until the regular season, I just don't see that being the case unless it's like everybody's going to hold on to their horses, just wait till like the first couple of weeks go by. It's like, okay, yeah, we need help at safety. Earl Thomas coming.
If the Cowboys pull this off, outside of, their latest injury to their defensive line, you'd have to say this has been nothing short of a potential home run offseason, would you not say? Like, say if they get him, right? They did lose some premier defensive backs to Miami in free agency, right? That was a big loss. They had to move some pieces around in the linebacker core, but all in all, they still have a pretty solid defense. Their offense has done nothing but improve. Like, I'd have to assume that Dak can only get better. One, because he has a coach now in Mike McCarthy that, with his few years, like from 2015 to 2017, he had passing plays, 67% of the Green Bay Packers offense was passing plays. So coming from a Jason Garrett led team where that was just not the case, I would think that Dak is going to be able to pass the ball a lot more, and thus is going to change the opinion of who he is as a player. It's going to open a lot more for the offense in general. And I think it'll be good for Zeke too, so he doesn't run his tires out too early in his career. So he might be able to help everybody out in the long term. They have CeeDee Lamb, of course, via the draft. We already know that Michael Gallup improved quite a bit. Like, he took a jump. They have Amari Cooper. It seems like they're figuring out that this is the window. Like, has to be the push. It can't get much better than this, really, can it?
I mean, no, not really. Like I said, their biggest arch nemesis is the Philadelphia Eagles, who's had their number the last couple of years in the biggest games. So if they can get past the Eagles, then you can then say, yeah, they may be ready to take that next step, because Eagles have taken that next step. They've won a championship. They've been through the grind. They've won the biggest games. So you can say that they're like that team that they have to overcome to truly, really say, okay, we've gotten past that team that's kept us from reaching our goals. Even though they've made it to the playoffs, even when they lost to the Eagles, but just still in general, just getting past them, beating a team like that, and then getting into the playoffs once again, I think is going to be very helpful for them moving forward. Because like you said, they brought in Mike McCarthy because they have a lot of talent. They believe in his coaching ability. They believe that, he had talent in Green Bay and he was able to had multiple winning seasons with that. So they think, okay, he'll be able to maximize our offensive talent, but also hire the defensive coordinator they hire will be good enough to help the coach defense. Obviously, like they said, they added a lot of players on defense this offseason, trying to, really improve what was their biggest weakness last year, especially on the back end. So, it's going to be important for them to, just do everything that they're supposed to do and reach expectations fully for the first time, because they haven't done that in a while. The only time they've ever reached their expectations was when they exceeded them, Dak and Zeke's rookie year, because we didn't know what they were going to be. And now ever since then, they've had expectations and they haven't necessarily been as good as we maybe thought they should have been, because that's always been the biggest issue with Dallas, since they have such huge expectations, being the Dallas Cowboys, is that they have huge expectations, and maybe that pressure is just sometimes too great for the team to overcome.
Well, last year, Dallas really underachieved because they beat a lot of bad teams early on. Everybody got hype, thinking that Dallas maybe has figured it out. There's a turnaround for Dak Prescott, and then throughout the rest of the year, the games were badly mismanaged. Things were just in disarray, and the offense wasn't clicking like it did early on, and thus you get what you get when it's a win or go home situation against the Eagles at the end of the season. And of course, Dallas couldn't pull it out. So this year, I would feel like, at least it feels something different. You don't have you don't have that feeling of, wow, we do look good, but we still have Jason Garrett, or it's not, there's a new breath of fresh air in the Cowboys locker room, all because of a coaching change. So you don't know what the team is going to look like now. And I'd have to say that I don't know if Dallas is top 5 in the NFC, but they got to be close to it. Like, I know they're definitely one of the better teams in the NFC, just by talent alone. Like, I'm not going to sit here and put them in the tier of, the 49ers, the Saints, not even, I don't know. I wouldn't even put them in the same class as potentially, I don't know, Minnesota, or Green Bay.
Wait, are you basing that off the talent, or are you basing that just off actual?
I mean, we've seen them make the playoffs, so I can't put them in, personally, I cannot put them in the same class because they just haven't done that. Now, talent wise, they're one of the more talented rosters in the league every year. In the past few years, they've been more some of the most talented. It just never really clicked and never got all the way there. So talent wise, they're among some of the best teams in the NFC. But as far as, success and, history, we got to see it before I can believe it. At least I got to see it. So I can't put them in the top 5, but the talent is there for them to make that push. And especially in their division, where the Washington football team is there. The Giants are not there yet as far as, being a competitor in that division. So you got 2 teams basically that Dallas should have no issues in winning unless, a big surprise comes. But on paper, Dallas should have no problem winning those games. Then you have the Eagles, of course. And like you said, they have problems with the Eagles. And the Eagles are not a bad team. They were just hurt really bad last year, and they still found a way. And the Eagles still have, in my opinion, the best quarterback in that division. That's going to be a challenge. And until Dak Prescott takes another step, or showcases that he is a better passer than he's shown previous, it's going to be that fact all the time. And, you know, just because a team has the better quarterback doesn't always mean that they're going to have the better outcome in the season, but it definitely gives you a better advantage at doing stuff. And I already said it last week, really, that I think the Eagles could have the best offense in the league when it's all said and done, just because Doug Peterson is pretty creative and they can figure out how to do some stuff. They have 2 really top tier tight ends. So I don't know. Dallas is not a home run, but this offseason is a good sign, right? I feel like it's a trend to the positive for Dallas. So we're going to take our first break here, and we're going to come back, and we're going to be talking about New England, because there's some news coming out of training camp that could be potentially big news for 1, fantasy owners, and 2, just for anybody interested in Cam Newton. So GSMC will be right back.
Listen up, sports bettors. This is Brice and Ethan here to tell you about our favorite sports book, and that's BetUS. Football, basketball, and baseball are all back, and that means it's time to get down your bets. We only endorse one sports book, and that is BetUS.com. Why, you ask? BetUS is the pioneer in online betting with more than 25 years in the biz. You need a sports book with integrity and longevity, and you need to know that you're going to get paid.
That's right, Brice. You need a sports book that offers everything, including live betting, MMA, golf, horses, esports, entertainment, and all kinds of crazy prop bets and futures. So call today at 1-800-MyBetUS. That's 1-800-MyBetUS, and they will walk you through getting started. Nobody in the industry gives better bonuses or bigger bonuses than BetUS. Join now, mention GSMC, and you get up to 150% in bonuses on your first deposit. Nobody beats that. We bet at BetUS, and so should you. So join BetUS today. That's BetUS.com, or call 1-800-MyBetUS, mention GSMC, and get 150% in bonuses on your first deposit.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, GSMC Football Nation, we are back, as in me and Brice. We're talking about the Patriots. Yeah, I know. It's like we don't talk about them enough on here, right? But once again, we're talking about the Patriots, and once again, it's about quarterback controversy. And it's really not that big of a controversy because, honestly, Jarret Stidham has not looked the best in training camp right now. He looks like a guy who does not get that many reps like he did a few years ago, for as long as he's been on the team. And honestly, this just makes me feel like Jarret Stidham was a smokescreen this whole time, because there's just no way Jarret Stidham was supposedly looking like the guy to start in the first place. It's just hard for me to believe that. So maybe this was a whole ploy, and they knew they had to get somebody at the back end at some point. And maybe they knew Cam was coming, or Cam would be there, and they made a calculated risk in that. But yeah, it's not looking good. And on Friday, it was reported that he got a hip injury and he will not be 100% healthy for several weeks. So that doesn't help him being the starter for week 1. And Cam Newton and Brian Hoyer, who they're both on the roster, are in a competition right now for the number 1 starting quarterback spot. And while none of them were overly impressive during the first week of padded practices, Jarret Stidham was the worst of the 3, and particularly in the turnovers department, where he threw 7 interceptions during team drills. So it's not good. So Cam Newton he was the projected starter heading into training camp. and Stidham's weak start of the camp and injury has kept him, or has really kept Cam Newton at the number one spot. And Hoyer has been serviceable through the first phase of the training camp, but Newton's athleticism and ability as a thrower outweighs what Hoyer brings to the table no matter what happens. So I guess the fact of the matter is, like what everybody kind of predicted what would happen with these guys is pretty much happening outside of the injury factor, is that, you know, Cam is still as talented as he's ever been. And even though he's a bit older, he's still pretty young comparative to. And what Cam's strengths are will always be his strengths for now. And his arm strength, his running ability, and, you know, just his physical presence. And apparently he's very, like, you know, he's very charismatic anyway, but the locker room loves him from what we hear. And that has to mean something. And if he's coachable, I really do think that Bill Belichick is going to roll the dice with Cam Newton over Brian Hoyer unless something catastrophic happens, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah. I mean, like I said, the biggest issue that Cam just has is that he's learning a new playbook, and it's the most, what people call the most complex offensive playbook in all of the NFL. That's why you see a lot of receivers and other like skill position guys, usually younger guys, struggle in the New England offense to start. So he has that, you know, going against him. But out of all three of the quarterbacks, he is the most talented. We are all aware of that. I feel like Brian Hoyer is really not in serious competition. I feel like they've always planned for him to be the backup quarterback regardless of what happens. And with Stidham being hurt, I think that just solidifies Cam as the starter. We have about 2 weeks before the regular season starts. So I don't see how you can make up ground, and unless Cam gets hurt and then Stidham gets healthy, I don't see how he would even have a chance to be the starter over Cam. And obviously with Cam, you're going to have to work him in there. You might have to like obviously scale the playbook back a little bit because, you know, he's still going to be learning it into the season too. So we'll see, you know, what it looks like. I mean, listen. So like I said, well, Cam's just, you know, he took this opportunity to have the possibility to show people that he can still play this game. He can still be a top quarterback in this game, and in that even if New England doesn't keep him long term, a team's going to be like, you know what, Cam showed us he can ball. We need a quarterback. We're going to go ahead and get Cam on our roster and help us win some games. So I think one thing, you know, with New England is everybody doesn't kind of know where New England's going to sit this year. Because there's like, there's that part of you that's just like, it's New England. They've been good for so long. Bill Belichick. It's like you don't want to bet against them and just say, yeah, they're going to be trash. But at the same time, it's like, you look at the roster, you look at how many players opted out, you look at the situation, and it's just like, I don't see how they would be in the playoff run at the end of the year or or potentially winning the division. It's kind of the same thing I like to say. It's like with the Spurs in basketball.
I was about to say, yeah.
They've been good for so long. Even when they don't look the best, it's like you don't want to count out Greg Popovich and the Spurs. It's not natural because you've never had to. Before it was just like it was a foregone conclusion they're making the playoffs. Now it's just like actually they go out on a limb and say they're not going to make the playoffs. It just seems like a big chance. So, you know, I think that, you know, the Patriots right now are just going through a part, even with their new uniforms, they're going through a part where, you know, they just have to figure it out along the way. We'll see how they look. Like, listen, you got to think about week one. They're playing Miami. Both teams have a lot of new guys, and that'll be an interesting matchup. It'll probably be Fitzpatrick from Miami against Newton, so we'll have to see how that looks. But it'll be a good test for both teams, and it'll be interesting just to see where New England is at that time, because, you know, they obviously are usually known as one of the most well-coached teams in all of the NFL. But with no preseason, really no OTAs or any of that, you know, where is every team going to really be at the end of the day? But really New England, where are they going to be? Because you know they put so much pride on that time in person, and they really never had that till literally this past month.
Let's also remember that a lot of their veterans opted out before the training camp even started. So that's another big thing. They lost a lot of players via opt-out on the defense, so it's not like they have the best returning roster that they could have had this year on top of that. So it's going to be a struggle, but the Greg Popovich comparison, I mean, it's always overdone. But I think the interesting thing about that is just when do you know that they're done? Because like we saw in the bubble, of course, they lost. And honestly, the Spurs got credit at this because they were going to be at the bottom no matter what. And they definitely did a lot of winning in the bubble to try and compete to get to the playoff. Mm-hmm. But, Greg Popovich is so good that with a team where maybe maximum 4 NBA players on, like everybody else is basically should have been in the G League, right? He found a way to make that roster playable at high level basketball. Like these are good teams in the bubble for the most part. And he found a way to make it work. And they didn't have no defense. Like their defense was non-existent. They played DeMar DeRozan at the 4, but he figured it out. And he got the best product out of that team that he could. And that's just what they've done since the Tim Duncan era ended, basically. When Tim Duncan retired, Manu was gone, and Tony Parker was traded to, Charlotte. Or did he leave? I don't remember.
He left to Charlotte.
He left to Charlotte, right, to still play. They still somehow, by tooth and nail, found a way to make things work with their dinosaur basketball of LaMarcus Aldridge. And then they had LaMarcus Aldridge and DeMar doing the 2-pointers and stuff. No threes still to this day. They still find a way to win. And that's the thing about the Patriots. That's why you can't count them out, because if they're cut from the same cloth. Bill Belichick is going to find a way to outcoach people. That's just how it's going to work. He's always been able to outcoach people. So getting outcoached is not really on Bill Belichick's radar. That's not something that he gets done too often. Who in his division is outcoaching him? No matter the talent. We talk about Brian Flores, right? We like what he's capable of. He seemed to figure some things out, right? But the Jets were not. No. The Jets aren't out coaching Bill Belichick.
Adam Gase ain't out coaching. Nah.
No, right? That's not happening. What's gonna happen in? Wow, I just blanked on their
Buffalo.
Yeah,
Sean McDermott.
Yeah, I mean, Sean McDermott. He's a good coach.
He's good. He's good at making adjustments. He's a guy who makes adjustments.
And over the past couple of years, it's been closer games, right? But at the end of the day, the Patriots have figured it out. Now, granted, they had Tom Brady at those times, so we'll see what happens. But it's going to be a different Patriots roster, and it's going to be different for people to adjust. It's not going to be the same offense, especially if Cam Newton is at the helm running the show. So if Cam Newton's at the number 1 QB spot week 1. You know what Bill Belichick's going to throw at you. He could have designed something totally crazy going on. You might see some option offense or something like that, which I would assume some design quarterback runs probably. He might go full college on us. He might even throw out the wishbone or something. Something crazy.
Wishbone.
Or, this could get really creative, especially since you don't know how long the season is going to be, right? There's no guarantee that the season even finishes. So maybe Bill Belichick is I'm seeing the writing on the wall here. Half my team has opted out. Over-exaggerated, of course, not half the team. But, a lot of players have opted out. I'm just going to have some fun. I'm just going to see what we have here and do some experimental stuff that I couldn't do with Tom Brady and the rest of these old fogies.
You think they're going to whip out some Wildcat?
They might,
They Cam out there. Hey, Cam could be lobbing up the Cam in the corner. Hey.
Listen, they might say, hey.
He's 6'4"?
Sony, come catch this ball come get this ball from under center. Let's try some things, right? Or
what's that play that Philly did against them in the Super Bowl? They call it the Philly special.
Yeah.
Now every team do it. They probably going to do that.
Now that would be interesting I don't think Bill Belichick's pride would allow him to adopt the Philly special as a play. But then again,
the Patriots special. Just put the team name by and boom.
Right.
The New England special.
Didn't somebody use the Philly special on them again? But it wasn't Philadelphia?
I want to say
season?
yes, but I don't remember who.
I feel like it was Tennessee.
It might have been Tennessee.
But I don't know.
Well, no, they did something different.
I know the timeout stuff or the violation thing.
Well, are you talking about in the playoff game?
Yeah.
It wasn't really a Philly. It was just more of remember the Tim Tebow jump pass?
Oh, that's what they did.
Yeah, that's what they did with Derrick Henry.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, I think, where do you feel the vibe is for the AFC East?
I mean, I think they're going to be, I don't think anybody looks at them as the best division, but I think they're going to be one of the most competitive. Because it just feels like there's a lot of teams where you're just like, it's easy to say the Bills are going to be the best and the Patriots are going to be the worst, and we don't know where the Jets.
No. Let's stop right there. No one's saying the Patriots are going to be the worst.
Well,
team
you know,
in that division.
the people out there saying that, not necessarily me, but just I know people are going to say that just based off what's happened this offseason. But I say,
look at the Jets roster.
I mean, they made some improvements.
They lost their best player via mutiny.
Okay, yes, they did lose Jamal. They did lose CJ too. So defensively, they won't be as good as they've been. So Sam Darnold's going to have to make some plays with the players they have. Hopefully, Le'Veon can come back and be better. They did add some receivers. Listen.
I mean, was Le'Veon even? Le'Veon wasn't even. He didn't look bad. Just they couldn't block, and they're giving him the ball with like there's no other offensive weapon besides Robbie Anderson last year. And Robbie Anderson, if that's your second best player on offense, you're going to have some issues. So all I'm saying is I'm taking Bill Belichick in the hurt squad, in the opt-out squad before I take any other Adam Gase product ever. Like that's just how I'm going to die on that hill.
Adam Gase been getting so much hate. I mean, hey, I think this would be his last year in New York anyway. So, hey, I should tell you what I think of their season. So, I think he needs to go on out. I don't know how he got another job right as soon as he left Miami, but I think he needs to go ahead and leave. I think Buffalo, like I said, as long as Josh Allen makes that next step and they continue to be good off defensively and everything, I think they'll be fine. And then, like I said, Miami to me is a wild card. It really just depends on how everything comes together. They have a lot of new players, so we don't know. They're probably going to start slow out the gate because they didn't have a lot of time together. But we'll see throughout the season if they maybe make another run. Because like I always like to say, that 7th playoff spot does make things interesting depending on how good the AFC as a whole is this year. Because you might be able to go 8-8, even potentially 7-9 and still get in. So, and some people are projecting Miami to be in that range. So that may be a sneaky team to watch out for.
No, yeah, for sure. I think that, like I said, they won't be the worst team. You never know what you're going to get from Cam Newton at this point because we haven't really seen him play in over like a year. But if we can get, average Cam, that's going to be better than probably average Brian Hoyer, and it's definitely going to be better than whatever Jarret Stidham is currently right now. So that's a plus for the Patriots. They at least have a starting quarterback that can play in the NFL. That's number one. Number two is they still have pound for pound the best coach in the NFL for right now. I don't know. It's either him. You could probably say Andy Reid at this point. Andy Reid's been a top 5 coach since he's been in the league, and now that he has a Super Bowl ring, that definitely elevates his status. But all in all, he's still probably the best coach in the NFL, and he's going to have the toughest challenge he's had, and he likes challenges, so we'll see. But we're going to take another break here and come back talking about Teddy Bridgewater. We're going to be looking at the NFC South and what the Carolina Panthers can do to change some things up and maybe change some opinions. That's coming up, GSMC.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, we're back. GSMC football And we're talking about the big Carolina, not South Carolina or North Carolina A&T or anything like that. We're talking about the Panthers, Carolina Panthers, and about Teddy Bridgewater, Teddy Two Gloves, Teddy B, Mr. Theodore, Mr. Big Teddy. We're talking about Teddy Bridgewater. And apparently coming out of camp, because we can't really see what's going on, but they had a 2-hour scrimmage inside of Bank of America Stadium, and it looked good for Teddy Bridgewater. So they said he started 7 for 7, finished 9 for 13 for 159 yards and had 2 touchdowns. And he had another touchdown, but it was wiped away by a penalty. So he had some strong numbers, although he did play not only against starters, but as well as, some backups. So, taper your expectations. But some analysts are saying that the Panthers will have the worst defense this year in the NFL. And the odds are they're going to be making a lot of quarterbacks look good. But this is another positive sign for Teddy Bridgewater, who has done everything right so far, staying late for extra reps in. And he looks like a good locker room guy, which, I already knew this because I was so sad to see him walk away from the Saints. But it was expected because if Drew Brees came back, of course, we weren't going to let Teddy sit on the bench for the rest of his career. That would be trash, right, for him. So, and, thank God I guess he has to thank God for getting the opportunity that he got last season, right, to showcase what he's capable of, because I don't know what Teddy Bridgewater's contract or where he would be at right now if he didn't have that basically 6 to 7 game showcase last year to show what he's capable of. But we got to talk about the Carolina Panthers, man. What are their chances of doing some things in the NFC South, let alone the NFC in general? And I got to start by saying this. The NFC South, time and time again, has shown itself as being one of the most competitive NFC divisions year in and year out. I don't think that is going to change. And considering that, Tampa Bay has upgraded for sure, potentially, right? We don't know, but we are thinking that, Tom Brady is an upgrade over Jameis Winston. The Saints, EJ or Emmanuel Sanders, they got some guys out there doing some great things. And, they got Drew Brees back for another year, basically. So as long as they have that young man, he is going to help them be as good as they can be. And then, of course, the Falcons are still the team that scares me the most every year, because at any given time, the Falcons can just remember that, oh, we have talent, and then things can change. So where does that leave really Carolina in a place of no man's land when honestly they have some really good offensive pieces, but unfortunately their defense literally got gutted over the past couple of years. And unfortunately they lost their best defensive player they've had in a long time since, Julius
Peppers.
Yeah, Julius Peppers. I almost called him Jabril Peppers. But Julius, after Julius left, is unanimously, he might even be better than Julius, some people say. Because Luke Kuechly has been the standard for linebackers basically since he stepped on the field. And he walked away, many people speculate, due to, head trauma, injuries and stuff. So it's a sad day. And that was a real shocker for a lot of people, especially Carolina fans. And that was like right before COVID-19, right? That he stepped away and said he wasn't coming for the next season and be done. So where do you think Carolina's chances are as far as the NFC South? And then do you think they even have a real shot at, winning some good games? Or is it going to be one of those seasons where it's a take my lumps season as they get all these defenders, because they drafted all defense this year, get these guys some reps, some experience and stuff.
Well, I think Carolina has a sneaky good offense. Obviously we have Christian McCaffrey. They have Christian McCaffrey, and how great of a player he is. He literally is an offense in and of itself. He was literally Carolina's offense last year. He got 1,000 receiving, 1,000 rushing. He could catch 80 balls, and then you can give him 250, 300 carries, and he can make some things happen. So when you have a playmaker like that, it definitely helps. in terms of, Teddy Bridgewater and everybody else knowing you got that guy you can rely on. Obviously, DJ Moore had a good season last year. He's coming back, trying to have a better year this year as well. They did pick up Robbie Anderson as a deep threat, someone who can stretch the field. So obviously that's going to help out in that department. They made that trade from the Chargers. I forgot. I think they picked up a tackle, I believe. They picked up a Pro Bowl tackle and they traded with a Pro Bowl guard. So they made that adjustment there, and then they signed somebody. And like you said, they drafted all on defense. So I think offensively they'll be fine. I think offensively they'll be able to make some plays. I think they're going to score some points. Because Teddy is probably a guy who's very efficient. He's not someone who's going to, so to say, light you up for 450 yards and 5 touchdowns. But he'll give you a solid 250, 2 touchdowns, maybe 19 of 24, and move you up and down the field and make the right plays when they're there, and take what the defense gives him, which I think is very efficient in that respect. So, I think that's going to help them, take some games. I wouldn't be surprised if they take a game from every NFC South team. I think it's definitely possible. Because, all it takes is Christian McCaffrey having one of those games, and then after that, making a couple more plays from everybody else, and you never know, they might be able to make a couple upsets happen. So, we'll have to see. It just depends on who you talk to. I mean, we'll have to see how it all turns out. It's possible that, the NFC South, the team that has the least amount of wins could still have 7 wins. Because that's happened before. Where you have your top teams and your last team's like 7, which is not a bad season. Usually you just think the whole 4th place team has 3 wins and then they had a horrible season. But I don't think that's going to happen in the NFC South this year. And I think that, the Panthers are a team to really take this year, build off of it. Okay, we have offensive talent, we got weapons, let's see how they do. And then defensively, you continue to build it, you continue to grow it, and then you really take that next step, and then after that, maybe next year, that's when Carolina becomes the team to be reckoned with, especially with we don't know where the Saints are going to be in a year after since we expect Drew Brees to retire, and we don't know where Tampa is going to be, depending on what happens this year with Tom, and then we don't know where the Falcons are going to be depending on their season and if they're going to be head coach or something. So, this next year will probably be the year for the Panthers to make their boom jump with all that uncertainty. But this year, I think if they can stay competitive in a lot of games and make teams have to really say, okay, we're playing Carolina. We gotta play our best against them. That's gonna help them because it's gonna give them that respect. And obviously Matt Rule, he's rebuilt 2 programs in college. Obviously this is not college, but he rebuilt at Temple, he rebuilt at Baylor, and now he's scheduled with rebuilding the Carolina Panthers and making them a very good team to be reckoned with going into the future. So I think we'll have to see what all happens. Obviously, I think one of the biggest additions that they made that people don't talk about is the offensive coordinator they got from LSU, Joe Brady. Obviously, we saw what he did with Joe Burrow and LSU, and I think he's going to try to bring that type of offense there to Carolina. And, I think Teddy Bridgewater can run that type of offense, and I think the receivers there are going to have a great year in some of their numbers because they're going to have opportunities to really make some plays because it's all about getting their playmakers in space and making plays. And, you can say, like I said, Carolina has some playmakers. So I would not even be surprised if Christian McCaffrey has another 1,000 rushing, 1,000 receiving year this year as well.
All right. Yeah, everything can be optimistic when you look at paper, when you start looking at names and you're like, yeah, these guys are good. Why can't they turn some things around? But that's not how everything always ends up being. And, we got to remind ourselves that even though LSU's offense was prolific, we got to remember that their defense did their job for the most part throughout the season too. And if Carolina's defense is going to be giving up 30 points a game, I don't know just how much can we depend on a Teddy Bridgewater led offense to score 30 points a game. As much as I love Teddy Bridgewater, I knew what he was good at and what was not his strengths. And Teddy Bridgewater being in a shootout is not his strength. And it seems like he's going to be in a shootout quite a bit with this roster on the other side of the ball. And that's going to be a challenge for them to try and overcome. Now, of course, that could be a wrong thing. Remember when the Falcons roster had a bunch of rookies on the defense and they kind of figured it out, and that was Super Bowl run, was it not? Mm-hmm. So I'm not sitting here saying that that's going to happen, but what I am saying is that anything is possible. Especially if the talent is there for real, right? So all I know is it sounds good what's coming out of camp, and you would want things to sound good because we all know that sometimes people butter things up in camp, right, and make it sweet. and make things sound better than what they end up probably being in the regular season. But that's just the nature of the job. But it's better to hear good things than to hear things like, Jarret Stidham is not impressing. Or you see that video that came out of camp from Washington with, Dwayne Haskins going up with Alex Smith, right? And they threw the same pass, same route. Alex Smith threw a dot, basically. And Dwayne Haskins, as soon as the ball left his hand, you can see that ball was going to be nowhere near that wide receiver. And it was just shockingly bad contrast between two players at that moment in time. And I'm sure that Dwayne Haskins is not that bad, right? He's not going to be that bad. But it's just the accuracy concerns are still going to be there. And you don't like that coming out of camp. Like, you don't want that to be seen on your social media. But unfortunately, people got it and, people had their fun with it. So it's good to hear that Teddy Bridgewater is not being clowned on social media, because that would be bad. And plus, I think everybody at this point, wherever he's been at, people love Teddy Bridgewater. So that's going to be a given for as long as he is who he is for the remainder of his life. Teddy Bridgewater is a class act person, a great personality, and he's a great community guy. Like, I wish he was still here with us, because he does so much for New Orleans. Or he did so much for New Orleans, and I felt like he was a real big culture guy, no matter what. And he was our biggest fan on the sidelines sometimes. So, and the fact that he came up big for us, he might even get his jersey retired for what that season was. Like, if we would have got to the Super Bowl last year, there'd be statues for Teddy Bridgewater in New Orleans, because without him, we wouldn't have done nothing. Like, if he was not good, not only would we not have blamed Teddy Bridgewater, because, it wasn't his fault. I mean, of course, we want him to be able to perform, which he did. But, we wouldn't have sat here and been like, you don't blame the backup quarterback for losing you games. He's a backup for a reason. Like, he's not set there to be the starter. It would just been unfortunate. But the fact that he came through and the Saints came through in general was a great storyline last year. And I hope that means that Teddy Bridgewater is going to be in this league for a while. So, good news out of camp for Teddy. It's going to be strange. Also, side note, you said that we don't know if Drew Brees will, how long he's going to continue to play. I promise you, I need him to retire after this year. I need him to retire, because the train has to stop sometime. At some point, he's hindering the Saints from moving on. It's going to be a bad business deal for the Saints to keep Drew Brees for as long as they are. They got to let the man walk. And if he really feels like he can play one more year, I guess he can go try and play somewhere else, because he can't come back, man. We can't keep doing this dance of, do we know if Drew's coming back? We've done it for 4 years. It's time to hang it up.
Jameis to get in there, then
I'm not ready for Jameis to get in there. You know what I'm ready for? The future. I'm ready for the future, and I'm ready for it now, because it's time, man.
Yeah, I don't know if you could be happy with the future, man, because the two names you keep hearing connected with it are not necessarily the ones you want to necessarily hear. Since you're hearing Jameis and Taysom, and you're just like,
No, I'm ready to hear drafted a good quarterback, drafted a future guy, got a future guy in the draft, because I'm telling you right now, man, I don't know what Taysom got, and I know what Jameis is. Jameis can start in this league. Jameis is who he is. That's all I have to say on that.
Hey, everybody go get their numbers. Everybody go score a lot of points. You just got to make sure you don't help the other team.
Jameis is who he is. That's just the bottom line. But we're going to take our final break here at the GSMC Football Podcast, and coming back, we're going to talk about some college stuff, as we have basically our first official bubble experiment in college football. And I don't know how we're supposed to feel about that. And we'll be right back. GSMC.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
All right, GSMC Football Nation, we're back for the final segment of today's podcast, where we are venturing onto the college campuses once again, because we got to talk about some NCAA college football, some Division I, some Power 5 things are happening rapidly, actually, and every day is a new question that has to be answered. And today's question is, how ethical is a college football bubble? And we have our first real bubble experiment kind of done by force. So around the country, especially in the SEC and in the southern hemisphere, and the southern region of the United States, we've seen a lot of bad things coming out of schools, from people going to unmasked parties, from, college towns having their bars open and be really, really packed to capacity, a little bit overflowing, to all different types of things going on. It's not looking good. And a lot of schools are getting some hot water. Even the illustrious Notre Dame is having issues, to where Notre Dame's cases tripled within a single day last Tuesday to 147. And they had to put a 2-week pause on their on-campus classes. North Carolina took it another step further, as they announced that they had 130 positive cases, and they suspended all in-person classes for the fall. So they're done, basically, with in-person classes. You're going home, or you're staying home, should I say. But the football team is still there, and they're going to remain there for the foreseeable future. So they are going to be practicing basically within their own college bubble at their stadium and at their practice fields, and basically have created their own bubble. And it seems to be the only logical step into having a fall football season, is to have people train on campus without students. So this has been something that was debated way long ago, that should we have, how are we going to have any sort of safety within the college football atmosphere? And that was to have athletes practice there, but have nobody else there around them via class and all that. And then that brings up a whole bunch of ethical questions, like, well, you can't have a bubble because campuses, to run a campus, to have, a football season means that you have to have students. That's what some people argue. That is just not really good. Even though, a bubble helps. Like the head coach of the Tar Heels even said himself, Mac Brown, he said that, it helps create a better seal and a better bubble around our program, and the NBA bubble model is working and they have very few distractions, which is true. But then again, the NBA bubble is a different level of no distractions. They really can't go anywhere without having a 10-day penalty. So, and that's before they even come back. And they're in the playoffs right now, of course, so nobody's really planning to leave unless they have to, like Mike Conley did, because of a birth of his child. So, college, you could go off campus right now to go get something to eat. It's not really a bubble. I mean, it's kind of pseudo. So it's just that you don't have all of these other factors involved. Now you're just dealing with your athletes, trying to keep them together. And, what they've done is create a pretty interesting bubble situation that a lot of colleges can go and replicate. And I'm sure everybody's watching. But, if they're not going to be able to have a season, this will be why. So it's because of the fact that these spikes were expected, but there was no, system to stop them, right? They just threw in all these college students to sit there and basically congregate for a week, and then you saw what happened. And unfortunately, this would be predicted. You're putting a bunch of young people in their own lifestyle environment that is filled with, togetherness and going to parties and going to events that they've long missed for months. They didn't get to do it all summer, supposedly. Of course, people still did what they did during the summer, and you see now they're still doing what they want to do now. So it compromises anything you want to do athletically. It compromises the money. And at the end of the day, in my opinion, I feel like the NCAA, all these conferences, especially the Power Five, especially SEC, ACC, Big 12, they are going to do what is best for that dollar, because at the end of the day, they can't even fathom the idea of the financial losses they're going to have this year if they have to not play. They don't even want to think about it. And the other, out of the 4 out of the 10 that have canceled or postponed it are looking to do it in winter and spring. Like, they are trying to make make the money back. They're not just sitting here and say we can't play at all. They're going to find a way to make the money. It's just that,
or some portion of it.
Yeah, like, they're going to try and make something out of this. It's not just, we're not playing at all. And that's just the toughest thing about this whole thing, with this bubble thing. How can you sit here and say that you can't have students on campus and have a bubble for your student athletes? So which one is it? So that's the biggest ethical question. Like, all the chips are off the table now for you, NCAA. What are you going to do when it comes down to these negotiations about name, image, and likeness, when you have schools and campuses basically like, yeah, we're treating the athletes different. They're different. They make us millions and millions of dollars. We're going to make sure that we do what's right for these guys, and, everybody else be damned. Like, you can't do that, right? Ethically. I mean, they're going to do it, but how can they do that, Brice?
I mean, it's kind of the biggest dilemma we've gone through this entire college football season. It's just like, the procedures and what we're going to do to get there. And you're seeing that some people have just taken that reckless abandon to it. And that's why you're seeing the cases that are happening. I mean, obviously North Carolina is doing what they have to do to make sure that they can stop the cases from going up. And you really hope other colleges would do the same thing, but you're probably not, because they're also looking at, like, the big thing is, like, if we want to go deep into the college atmosphere, is like, okay, if we stop classes, then what does this mean for people who live in dorms, and do they have to go home, et cetera, et cetera. And obviously we know college areas, there's a lot of people who live there in apartments too. So they're still, so even though they might have canceled in-class classes, they're still there, but they have no reason to be on campus where the players are going to be. So that helps, kind of limit the exposure to a certain extent. And, I just think that, we, have to just keep monitoring the situation. Like I said, they're trying to make a portion of the money back. They're trying to have some type of money come in, because if they have games, they still get to be played on TV, which means they still get that TV money coming in. And obviously that's usually, if not the biggest, but the biggest chunk of money they can potentially get. And so that's very important that they keep in that money from the TV networks to play their games. Obviously, you got to think about, almost every conference has their own, like, channel now, like, SEC network. I think they have a Pac-12 network. I don't know if they have they have a Big Ten network too. I don't know if they have a Big 12 network though. And I believe they just released the ACC network a couple of years ago. So you got to think about the games that were going to be on there, even though it's their own network and they're partnering with ESPN. Like, you were supposed to have games on that network. Now you're not going to have games unless you're in the ACC, SEC, or again, if the Big 12 have a network on the Big 12. So it's just kind of like, there's a lot of things that go into, what's going to happen this season. And really, obviously the main priority should be the players and protecting them and limiting their exposure as much as possible. Because the last thing, like I said, that the worst case scenario is we're getting closer to game day and then somehow 12 players test positive. And it's just like, well, what are we going to do now? Because, like I said, we could have baseball situations where you have that type of number and they're having to postpone the game because it's just like, well, we just lost a lot of people. Do we want to still go ahead and play this game with 12 less people on the roster? Or because it's not because of injuries, because we haven't counted the injuries, like actual real injuries. We're just talking about the COVID people. And so it's a very risky situation, but at least, like you said, one, school is taking a chance here with it and trying to see if it works. And then maybe if COVID cases get worse on other college campuses, maybe they'll go ahead and say, okay, we'll do the same thing they're doing. We're going to shut down in-class classes and we're going to allow the athletes still to be here. We're going to keep them within the practice facilities and everything. And we're going to still have game days and everything like that. Because I think as far as we know, still they're not going to have any fans in any of the college arenas and fields. So
that's not true.
I want to say sure. That's what
I'm pretty sure the SEC is like they're leaving that up to whatever the states decide. No, because they're run by the states. So basically, whatever the states decide to say that they can do. And you already see in Georgia, Georgia can have fans in the stands. It's just about
they probably just can't do full capacity.
No, of course. And now they're just like picking and choosing which season ticket holders, get to do it. And the same thing for the Atlanta Falcons, right? They do it via season ticket holders.
Oh yeah, that would kind of suck if you're a season ticket holder and say, yeah, we can't let you.
Well, I mean, it's done game to game to keep it fair, I think.
So it's like, you can't come to this game, but you come to this game type thing?
I guess so. Okay. That's what I was
it's
told.
8, so you can keep it 4-4, 50-50. But, yeah, man. So it's I mean, honestly, we talk about the NFL and what they're going through. The college game, that's still going to be the real question of how they're going to handle it, because they have so many different things they have to like concern themselves with and put together. Because NFL is more strictly straight up. I mean, players getting paid. It's mainly about fans, because not every team's allowing fans, but some teams are. And basically just making sure that the players aren't being reckless. Because I've heard within the NFL locker rooms that veterans are trying to police players and be like, hey, don't do anything reckless, okay? Like, we don't need anything to happen. But college, they're all at the same age. So it's just kind of like, you could tell them, we were in college just recently. You can tell someone, hey, don't do it. And then you hear something going on. And it's like, man, I got to make an appearance. I got to show face at least, and then something can happen. So
right, like I'm about to live it up. Or somebody will be like, I'm just going to get some wings, and they don't come back till like 2 a.m. or something like that.
Yeah, man, that line was long, man. Then I had to wait because they ran out.
Like, it's wing night, man. I gotta go. It's like, I gotta go get that. It's 50-cent wings. I gotta go. It's over with at that point. It's a lost cause.
Yeah, man. So, I mean, it's just, that's the dilemma they got to go through. So, unless the coaches are going to be out here talking about, all right, we're going to monitor you guys. We want all y'all to send y'all locations to the coaches. And y'all better not go anywhere recklessly. You have a curfew and everything. Unless, because I feel like, again, that's optional. Every team can make that up themselves. You might have some teams that say, these are strict rules. And some coaches are just like, listen, we're not going to restrict you too much, but just make good decisions. So.
Hey, I don't know. All I do know is this can't be, this is probably the worst situation that the NCAA has found themselves in a long time, where they're facing at the forefront this name, image, and likeness bill stuff happening, where all these states are basically threatening to make their own name, image, and likeness legislation, and the NCAA doesn't want that because the NCAA wants control. So now they're like, well, help us make one. Congress is basically giving them tongue lashings every other day. And it's not really, it doesn't even look like progress is really being made on that whole front. And then on the back end, you have the coronavirus pushing boundaries that you never thought would be showcased in real life. Like, the coronavirus is forcing the NCAA to basically show everyone how, hey, we actually don't treat student athletes the same as we treat regular students. At all. It's always been a facade, but now this time for real, they have to show it. And to be honest, at this point, I would just much rather see the NCAA lean into it rather than to pretend that they do. I'd much rather them be like, you know what? Yeah, we treat them different. We're going to do this still. Like, this is it. Like, whatever happens, but we got to do what we got to do right now. So y'all can sit here and have a parade about, yeah, you caught us red-handed, but we're going to go and make this money. Like, I just feel like that's what the NCAA is here to do right now. They're here to continue to keep the bread going. And the bread is the athletes, the student athletes, quote unquote. And whatever happens in the next few years because of this is going to be very paramount, but the NCAA is looking at the now and not the future. Because they're looking at the future, this would have been nipped in the bud probably. Mm-hmm. We probably see some NCAA dollars coming out to to the players and to the athletes at this point, right? So it's always been about the now. The NCAA doesn't save money, right? They always are spending on stuff because they have to act like they have no money in order to say that we don't have enough money to pay the players. So now they don't have any savings to protect themselves from this sort of day. And they're going to look like they're going to have to pay the players sooner rather than later. So it's going to be a tough scene. But that's it for GSMC. I always do it every time. But a GSMC football podcast, not the fantasy one. But thanks, guys, for listening, checking in. Brice, you have any last thoughts, last words?
No, man. I'm good over here for the most part.
All right. Well, don't forget, subscribe, rate, review the podcast, and don't forget to follow our social media, Facebook, Twitter at GSMC Football. We'll see you all next Monday, man. Peace out.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.